Okay, students, thank you so much for your work on these final perspective drawings, linear perspective drawings from observation. I will be trying to supplement the critiques you've already received in our Canvas discussion here verbally in case that's more helpful. And if questions have already been answered extensively, or I have answered them in your previous version, in the draft version, I probably won't spend a lot of time with it here. I'm going to try to make it quick so it's a manageable length to get through. All right, here we go. Okay, so we have a question here. I would love some feedback on the towels. And I know a lot of people just weren't sure where the towels were, which I think speaks to a little the need for more detail and clarity. So what I noticed in this piece is that there's a lot, you came a long way in terms of adding contrast from your draft, but there's still a lack of clarity and the value scale still remains pretty similar. Even though I know it felt like you got really deep here by but it looks like maybe there's some pet accoutrement there and this back wall, it still becomes really sort of difficult to differentiate between the objects here. And then this value here is very similar to the value outside the window. So as I know we talked about, there's so much going on here and a lot to really appreciate, but we can't appreciate it if it's not brought to life through the use of value, but also the use of a clarity of edge. And so instead of relying on those outlines, you really want to give things depth by making the value of this, let's say the top of the desk where it meets the side of the desk change, or these drawers where they meet the edges, or here sort of defining what this is. Is this a curtain coming down, or is that a corner of a wall, or is that just where the drywall juts out and then goes back in? I think it's fine to leave this level of detail outdoors, but then you'd want to really give it a heightened clarity here. I think one thing that's working really well in this image are these blinds. This feels very believable here. I know precisely what it is, and that I can tell that there's daylight coming through, making the blinds themselves sort of act as shadow. You mentioned maybe being able to highlight more areas. There's not areas of true white or the white of the page, and I would say yes. As much as we darken in our drawings, we also want to highlight. Okay, the question here, a small section of the paper was ripped due to the tape. I'm sorry about that. That is frustrating, but you've done a good job hiding it. It really doesn't bother me. I can see that it is here. Lighten it more, blend it better together. It does look like cracks in the wall, not so bad. Yeah, there's really not a ton you can do there because any darkening you do, it's just going to catch that edge of the paper. The paper here is now super textured where it's not elsewhere. So the only way to really deal with it is to make it sort of a dark, which is, not really worth altering your drawing all that much for that. Just make sure with that tape that you're taking off a level of adhesion before you begin. You may have already done that, but sometimes if a tape stays on there long enough, it will tear. I would like to zoom in here, but I can't. I can see that this, cat scratcher, there's just so much loving texture there. And if you look closely here at the bottom, this is sort of the moment for me. There's so many different shadows. I can truly feel that I could go under that couch. I appreciate the additional detail of the purse on the doorknob there that was added from your rough draft. Again, smaller details here. If you want to push this even further, I would say that this tree looks a little underdone. It sort of has a stick for a trunk, and it's not necessarily thinking of a tree as value, but it's thinking of it more as shape. So I would not be afraid to really go all the way in terms of your detail in this drawing. And then I think values could be added there. But this is an extremely successful drawing. We feel like we're there. The viewpoint is accurate to where a human would be standing, and it feels like we could just stretch out on that couch. The question here, is the table shadow believable? There was a light source above the table and near the viewer. Yes, I think I don't question this so much. It looks certainly brighter over here in the top left and darker over here in the bottom right. We can see that it's dark outside or it's dusk or later. So that it doesn't really affect the work. I would say you could think of a different value between this wall and this wall, just slightly. I mean, you'll notice if you look around your house, no matter what color the walls are painted, whenever there's two different planes, so this side versus this side, they're going to have slightly different values between the walls. So I would consider that. You did a ton of work on this wood grain. It really pays off. And you really remedied that table angle. The game pieces, the chair you heightened. So you did a lot of work from the last draft, and I really appreciate seeing that. Okay, I think there's a question here about the thickness of the lines, I do believe that this image still is pretty heavy on the outline. So, you know, every pillow has an outline, the chair has an outline, the rug has an outline, the coffee cup has an outline. So really trust yourself to be able to describe the objects without the use of outlines. And I did talk about this in the first draft, but this is a 1 point perspective, so we want these lines to come out horizontal and to not be vanishing. So that would be closer to there, and this TV would be there. If you want this to go all the way to the back wall, you'd have to push it all the way back in this corner here. And these wood planks out here on this deck, because they're so far away, the fact that they're ending there feels, I don't know, it feels like this is sort of following a different perspective. For some reason, this feels a bit odd out here. I would maybe detail this railing a little bit more or change this value from the outside. I think the really successful part of this drawing is this shadow here under the curtains. It just gives a sense of depth. I can almost feel the thickness of those curtains, and I can picture, you know, a cat playing under there or just something. It really brings it alive. I think I think everything else will come alive too if you just trust more on values like this coffee cup, you know, the tree, and if you fix this perspective to make it be a true horizontal. All right. Okay, question here. Value in the roof is not working well. Okay, the ceiling there. I worked more in detail and was wondering, does my glass door look better, and what should I work on more there? Yes, I think the glass door does look better, but I would give some sort of clue as to what is outside. I know one of your peers gave that comment in the discussion thread as well. Without any hint, you know, like maybe there's a parking lot or a fence or a deck or just something, you'd want to draw it in a little bit more blurred or undervalued than you would on the inside. You don't want it to come forward in space. You don't want it to take any attention away from the room. But if you don't do it, it starts to look like a mirror or something else. We can't remember that glass. You can always see through it. It just catches a couple reflections. That's the only difference. This cat still just steals the show with the way that it's leaning there, this beautiful angle, the way that the legs are outstretched. That's a really lovely drawing. In terms of the ceiling, which you mentioned, I would just blend it more. I think that this light you could erase here around the edge of the light fixture, and that would really make it pop. But one thing I mentioned in the draft, and it's still not working here, which I feel is really important to figure out. So we have this curtain that goes behind this bookshelf, but this bookshelf appears to end on the same plane as everything else. So it appears that it's both shoved back into the wall and coming forward, which just doesn't make sense. So the way to fix that is to bring it, again, my challenge of drawing straight with this pen, but to bring it forward into the room like so. So this is my clue that it comes out into the room, out into space here. And if I can see that, and I can see this area where it jogs, you know, we'd see a little bit of that side, then I'm going to believe, okay, this bookshelf is actually happening in front of this curtain. But otherwise, the whole thing doesn't feel too realistic there. And then this baseboard heater, it looks like it's just running parallel instead of vanishing. So make sure that would just start to grow a little bit because it's vanishing this way. And so this end of it would be larger than this end. Wonderful work on the blinds. I especially love where they like get kind of pinched together because everyone knows these, you know, these blinds get tangled, and that just makes it really realistic. And then here's another example of a shelf that needs to come down into the room. So yeah, just let me know if you have any questions on that. And then you'll notice how this value of this wall and this value of this wall are very, very similar. So it makes it less believable that I could actually walk behind here and into that hallway, which I believe is the case. So make sure you just really push that change of value. Maybe make this wall really light and give this wall more value since it's further back. Those are things to consider. Okay, question here. Fill in the background space, added the trees. Yeah, this came a long way and it was really fun to work with you on this. But as I said in the draft, we need these chairs to come straight. I would, and then we also need to figure out this counter here. I think this was like a step down, maybe. So it's not necessary that you detail out everything. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's actually what's going on back here, but I think it's worth it that you at least get this figured out in a certain amount of lines. It doesn't need to be as high of detail as this. I think it's wonderful that this sort of remains the centerpiece, this table. And I could see you did a lot of work over here with the drawing of the deck out here and the light switch, etc. This photo or picture on the wall. It's okay to leave the ceiling sort of underdone. But since this is so close to the viewer over here on this side and the chairs are the focal point, you're going to want to make sure that you get that that you get that accurate in terms of the perspective, because then we won't question it and we'll just be able to enter the scene with more confidence in that this is a space we belong. I think likewise it's totally fine to have this sort of fade out, but I would give us just like a little bit more of that chair and make the fade out a little bit more gradual rather than this like blunt cutoff there. Really, I think this is a great use of like how just a little bit of value can really bring so much richness to a drawing. There were no questions on this one, so I'm not sure how to direct the feedback, but one thing that I realize is, or that I'm seeing, is that this outside patio appears to be going like uphill. So we want to bring that vanishing point down. So I'm not sure where your vanishing point is here, but it looks like this gets a bit jumbled on this side. This all feels really well figured out. Maybe your vanishing point is somewhere here. So this drawer would be more like this, and maybe this would be steeper. And then the other vanishing point is somewhere over here, I believe. Yep, there. So, okay, so maybe that angle there of the patio is correct, but it's the fence that throws us off. So, okay, I think what's going on, I'm figuring this out as I'm drawing, is that the lines in this patio pavers are on what they are going to the correct vanishing point over here, but they're not following this vanishing point over here on the left. So that makes the whole illusion that it's going uphill. So I would relook at that. I mean, there's so many loving details here down to the bark in the tree and these like, you have even a little bit of atmospheric perspective where the trees behind these other trees are lighter. So that's a really nice effect. I would think a little bit more about this like plastic garbage can liner. It appears to be really like sort of puffy. So to consider that. And then this is a really nice view into another room. Again, this sort of island, it looks good, and these chairs are quite complicated. So you took time to figure all of this out, but now it just needs that extra level of analysis and editing and another draft to really make it fully believable that we could enter this kitchen, and this is a drawer we could pull out, and this is a sliding glass door we could walk out on. Speaking of that, though, I think this is a great example of how you don't actually need much on glass doors in order to know that that's the outdoors. Just by the way you did this threshold here and the door jamb, we're able to understand that's outside, and these are closed glass doors. So nice work on that. Okay, again, we don't have a question to go off of, but it does look like, yes, I agree that this now is obvious it's a diagonal hallway. Before we were missing this line right here, and it's just amazing how one little line or detail can throw the viewer off, or assure the viewer that they're understanding the space. So yes, I believe that's a diagonal hallway. There's a little bit more value on the floorboards, which is helpful. A lot of great detail here in the rug, especially this little edge of the rug is so nice. I don't consider that an outline. I consider it just an edge, a value that sort of lets us understand the depth. Because you'll see over here on this side of it, we can actually see, if I could zoom in here, which I can't, but you can see this little edge of the hair coming out, where here you like see where the rug was cut. So nice attention to detail, an interesting sort of couch bed here that I can understand quite well. You put the reflection in the fridge and the garbage can change. So nice job paying attention to the suggested revisions on your first draft. All right, so this is a work in progress, we are to understand, but it's certainly, there are so many details and a lot to go off of already. Looks like you're going to be introducing darker values, but want opinions on the white wall. Some of it is okay, leaving out the painted menu. Yeah, I think I would agree. I don't feel that we're missing it. The outside window where the string lights are hanging. Okay, so we're out here, is visible through the glass, has some good graffiti. Tempted to include it, might alter the vibe or the mood. In addition, yeah, these are all really valid considerations. I think if you are going to give much detail to what's way out here, I mean, not only are we the furthest away in this room, but we're also outside the building, and not even just outside the building, but on the other building, which is presumably on the other side of the street, or at least further away, then you're really setting yourself up to go in hyper detail inside. So just remember, it's all relative. So whatever is going to be furthest away, if you're going to make it really detailed and in high clarity, then you have that space is going to come forward. So if we can see way out there that well, then we'll be able to see those bottles down to the printed, like where the distillery is, you know, where it's distilled, and like down to every single label. So I'm not sure you totally want to go there. If you feel like this level of detail you have on the left is sort of where you want to be, like I think I think it's pretty successful in the coffee maker, the espresso machine for sure. These cups here are really nice. So I think I would, if you're going to do the graffiti, just have it be very subtle, like a little bit that lets us understand the distance. And if you can do that, just think about that value range, that 9-step, 8-step value scale that you did in the beginning of the quarter. See if you could even expand that a little more to like 10 or 11 steps of value. And just hang out in the very low end out here. You know, we're talking about white versus a very light gray. And then here, up here, we really get into the blacks and the harder edges and the harder details. And I think that this brick wall is going to help delineate that too, that space. It sort of lets us understand like, okay, this is the inside, we're leaving the inside now and we're hopping out to the outside. But why not, you know, give it a shot if you can. Okay, did we answer the questions there? I don't think it's going to alter the vibe mood. I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's just a very lived-in human space, and I think that adding that isn't going to hurt you. It would just be the sort of compressing of space that I would worry about. Okay, feedback on the doors. You know, I at first was just looking at the thickness of this door, and the doorknob and the shadow, which I felt was all working really well. And we talked about the thickness in the first draft, and I believe you've gotten some feedback from peers. But now that I'm looking at it again, I am thinking that this distance here, sorry, not drawing straight. This distance here, there's no way, if this door closed, it would only cover like this much, right? So I think that this door should come out to here, which means, and then I have a trick loaded into Canvas from the week we started this about door openings and how to think about it. So you could always reference that if you have more questions. But this is sort of what I'm thinking for this door size. And then the handle, not too high there. And see how that feels. And then the shadow would just kind of go back like that, and you could keep it pretty much as is, maybe shorten it a tiny bit. But you know, I wasn't there, and this is a very unusual room. Nothing is like built on a 90-degree angle, so it's a super challenge to take on, which I think is the strength of it. For me, what still steals the show, is this top of this chair. I mean, I cannot picture a more realistic top of a rolling like pleather or leather office chair. I mean, that just feels really lovely. And also these small details of the hinges, the speaker, the way that the highlight rounds, I can just tell that that's concave, that goes in. Really kind of a cool vibe. So yeah, check out that Canvas thing about the door openings, and I'm happy to give another demonstration or a demonstration on that specifically if needed. Okay, shaded the books more. We don't have a question here, but you know, there's just so much loving detail, and I already talked about this in the draft, but really nice. You can just sort of tell that it's so much wood. It's such a cozy atmosphere. The way that the shading sort of envelops the back of these books or magazines as they go deep into the shelf, this lovely shadow of the lamp, it's all working well. You did fix some of the floor shadows. Still, I'm a little bit caught up with this chair, and I think if you didn't want the chair to be that much of a distraction, you could just maybe soften it, but it looks a bit like there's this super obvious seam because of the value change between that side and that side, and then that's really stark, but I can't, there's like no value change between this plane of the chair and this plane of the armrest, and then these, I just feel like it could use a little bit more blending and time and attention to detail, or remove it. But I do really love that it's there, because this room feels like it's all about reading and you want to sit down, and you know, you can't wait to like get into all those books. So I do appreciate the chair being there. I feel like it needs to be a comfy chair, and so I think you're sort of stuck figuring out how to resolve it. I think what's working well are the feet of the chair. I can tell that the shape of this chair feels real, but it just doesn't change value as it changes planes, and so that's where it could use the most work. I have just like no suggestions for up here. The shadows behind the frames, the way that you detailed the books, the way that you detailed the wood paneling, how it gets closer and tighter together on these cabinet doors, the handles on the drawers, just really lovely. These sort of wrought iron hinges, great. Okay, 2 things appreciate feedback on is, thank you for spelling it out like this. This is extremely helpful. If the perspective works all right or not, and where the viewer's eyes are drawn to in the picture and why. So for me, my eyes are drawn to right here. There's just such a story there. This sagging couch, the way that you've detailed the highlights. I mean, this is such a nice example of cloth, how cloth isn't actually darker lines on a lighter surface, but it's more the changing of value. So I've said that a bunch, but it's nice to really see it in action here. You have a nice detail here, a little sphere on the floor. That seems like maybe a little nod to our earlier assignment, a bit meta. Is the perspective working is your question. I think The photo seems to be loaded at a slant. I can tell that because I can see the edge of the paper here and I can't see it here. And I can tell that this is slanted. So I can't stress this enough, but you really want to privilege and prioritize how you upload your photos. Make sure that they're straight, make sure that they're cropped, make sure that they're bright so that we can really see. This is an example of where relativity is not quite working or is a little off. We see this sort of darker, starker value in the painting, which is sort of a nice addition. I can see that you're trying to do some like gestural abstraction there in the art, but then the frame is like really faded and hard to see. And then the lights here are not very valued. There's certainly a lot of detail. You spent time on them, so why not give them as much contrast as you're giving this pillow so that we can feel like they're a three-dimensional object and that what's inside this painting isn't coming and jumping out of the frame. I appreciate that you cleaned up these edges on the curtains. They appear sheer, which is quite nice. I would add, if they are actually white sheer curtains, I would put a little bit more highlight. So not quite as thick of areas of darker value. But that's all very interesting. This was mentioned at the very beginning in your draft, but this crown molding is working really well. And then once this image gets loaded in straight, I believe that will rectify the slope. But this chair is across the diagonal, and we need this to be a true horizontal. And maybe this chair feels like, or excuse me, sofa or couch feels like it's tipping because this end is pulled towards us, but it doesn't get any larger. So, you know, maybe, I don't really want you to have to redo this couch because it's so, it's kind of the showstopper, but, you know, if this was clearly bigger and closer, I'm exaggerating here, but bigger and closer to us, then it wouldn't feel like it was actually at an angle. So I might need to sit down and look at this more closely with you, or you could try just uploading it a little bit straighter and see if that does the trick. Okay, this one, there's no question to go off of, and I can't, this image is not, it looks like it's just a cell phone and that the cell phone photo that wasn't cropped and then the margins were cut off and it's a little bit dark. So in terms of images for final works, I really want you to get the full 11 inches by 14 inches in there. And this should be on a finished piece of paper. So just some tips that are, you know, I've been talking about all quarter, and they just really are important to me because this is all I have to go off of, and your work deserves the best light, you know, to be shown in the best light because you've worked hard on it. This room, I gave some feedback on it before, but we want these rafters to come down into the space. Otherwise, they look like they're sort of buried in the ceiling. And if that's the case, if they are buried into the ceiling, and this is sort of like a Tudor style, which I don't believe it is from the photo, I think I remember, then, you know, you need to like do the hardware so we can understand this. Whenever you take on a really complicated space like this, you're setting yourself up for more work, which is awesome. But there are some details you can't overlook or skip because the viewer just isn't sure what to make of this space. A couple other things I'm noticing is these lights are hanging at like an angle. So if they're truly hanging, it would be a true vertical. And then I believe that these, you'd want them to just feel more bright and white. As it is, they look like sort of darker in value. So yep. And then these doors feel like I could just reach there, right there in that handle. I would love to see this larger. And then I believe that this, I appreciate how much value you gave the outside windows because it is nighttime, but there's so much texture that it's not clear whether it's a glass to the outdoors or whether it's, you know, like acoustic panel or something because there's a lot of line quality there. So again, a really challenging room to take on. I totally commend you for doing that, and I just would love to see it edited and gone a bit further there. Okay, I finished the window and shadows. I noticed the baseboard looking slightly off. Yeah, we talked about the baseboard in the last draft, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but this shadow is what really needs, I think you just need to take it out because it's looking like it's going over the desk itself without giving any clue to what's there, and so it starts to become like its own thing, and that is just a little bit too much. It's unclear what it is and it becomes more of a distraction. You did a great job figuring out this vanishing point here and fixing that. One thing I really appreciate about this, oh, you also fixed this over here, thank you. The blinds, the way that they're pulled up, I would give them a tiny bit of depth there. We should be able to see the underside of those blinds, but this lovely cloud drawing out there is just quite nice. I hope you all can take a look at that a little bit. Yeah, I think that there's still a lot of outlines going on and that this shelf here should realistically be brought a little bit further down. it just feels super steep there and a little bit warped. I think that's just from forcing your vanishing points really close together. But to truly draw from observation, if it doesn't fit, you don't want to force it. You just rely on the angles there. And yeah, just lovely details over here. I'm not sure where the shelf went. It should go out like that, and we should see a little bit more of it there. So it looks like kind of this shelf is missing. We can see the edge of it, but we can't see the shelf itself. And then the baseboard just appears to change thickness. So, you know, when we're drawing, sometimes things just aren't working. We swear that's how they look as we're seeing them, but then the more we work on them, sort of the less they make sense. So in that case, it's always okay to just kind of just not bring as much attention to it. So that can mean lessening your outlines, not having such a hard outline around it, letting it sort of fade so that the viewer isn't so thrown off by it. And then right here where the corner of the room starts, you want some kind of clue that that's where the two walls meet. So that line is missing there. And as I mentioned before, you want to give a little bit of a different value to the walls and to the ceiling and to the floor. Question here, what is a technique to make objects not disappear with shading, and what other feedback do you have for the drawing? So with not disappearing, that's charcoal work is all about layering, so I actually want the work to disappear a little bit, and because that forces you to bring it back with further detail, with further shadow, with further edging. And yeah, it can be frustrating, but it's also just really a part of the process. The drawing becomes richer and richer the more value you have there. And I always work sort of with an eraser and with a pencil or with a charcoal pencil at the same time. So I can, if I'm worried about completely losing an object, I can brighten up the edges or bring it back sort of as I go. This is a really captivating image. I think the strength is in this lovely like tree shape and negative space. Just compositionally, this is quite a nice image out here. The vantage point, the viewpoint itself feels pretty forced. Like I don't believe this was quite as it looked through a viewfinder. It feels like you're looking through a fisheye, or like you're using that realtor's trick with the camera and forcing the two vanishing points close together. So I would think about that for really creating a realistic space. You want to kind of relax those vanishing points if you're doing 2D, not 2D, excuse me, 2-point perspective. And then, you can see there with the arrows that I just drew, that puts our vanishing point way up here on a door. And I'm guessing if a door, the handle's probably closer to here, and then maybe this is our eye, maybe lowering the horizon line a little bit to just bring us down off the ladder. We look like we're sort of peering up above this space. And then I can see this plant is kind of disappearing with the glare from the photo, and that you probably did that with graphite. So just think about that when you're taking images of your work, that you don't have much of a glare, or that your graphite maybe is a little softer and that you're not totally sealing off the fibers of the paper. I think the wood grain in the floorboard is extremely inviting. This, I'm not sure what to make of it, as it is just a line there. It feels like it's a whiteboard or something, instead of a painting or a drawing or a photograph, or what it actually was. So I would give more attention there. And this little slice of negative space, I believe this couch would be here all the way, but again, with these vanishing points so close together, it's a little hard to say what's going on there. Maybe actually the couch would go like this. I don't know, I'd have to look at that again. But yep, good work. The lines in this are all going to go towards this vanishing point over here. So very, very close, very captivating image nonetheless, because of this great range of value that you're showing. Okay, question here, looking for feedback on the values and shading and the quality of detail of the drawing. So I think that means, like, does everything have the same level of detail as, oh, I see, yeah, it was difficult to give every little thing the same amount of attention and detail. Yeah, that's of course natural. I think that if you are prioritizing it, you want it to be what's closer to the viewer, and I can see here, you really detailed this interesting sort of side table, the lamps, the small little face on the cat and the shadow of the cat. So yes, that all feels right. This sort of linear work and shading the table feels a little bit rougher than maybe it needs to be. I would encourage you to just soften that and to go all the way to the edge and really sort of be a little bit gentler with that mark making. Not because that's required, but just because compared, it overpowers this little cup here. And this book feels really nicely drawn, but it doesn't really match that sort of textured value that you've given there. Again, it's stylistically, it's a choice, right, to leave that mark, but then you have to sort of carry it through and really work on that balance. Some of the areas feel a little too high of contrast, like here, the shadow feels, very dark compared to here. There's sort of like a sudden, this is a very drastic shadow here. And so maybe you could afford a little bit more subtlety there, which would maybe help us see the other really nice subtle details you've done, like this way that this light is refracting up against this wall in that curved area, the detail of the shelf, the slight little drawings here, the way that these stairs go down outside. Yeah, so I think, yes, you gave attention to everything, but the balance isn't always there. I do love how that texture wraps around the couch arm. Really good with the carpet texture and this slight spacing of the TV stand away from the wall, working great. Okay, this one I already discussed in the draft, that I think this fire extinguisher needs some just sort of a different shape to be fully believable, and a little dimensionality to the hose, because, not because you have to give everything dimension, but because it's all right here in front of us. It's the closest thing to us, and there aren't a lot of other details to look at, so it's important that you do give what's in front here a lot of attention and accuracy. I'm still a little unsure of what happens at the top of these stairs here. It looks like I would go up them and take a left maybe around this corner, but this ceiling feels too short. It could be that this ceiling ends a little sooner, and then these stairs are allowed to, that there's more headroom up here. So I would just look again at that because it's unclear what's going on. And then this wall, the way that this sort of alarm box or light electrical box is in perspective, it makes me wonder, why is this wall in perspective going back, or is this wall facing us like this wall over here? So just some questions I had that I also mentioned in the earlier draft. Okay, so questions here. Yeah, living minimally, choosing things that have a story. I think that's okay because you're choosing this sort of intimate corner that doesn't feel like a traditional, perspective drawing. It's not sterile. It feels like we're sitting on the floor. There's a contemplative mood to it. Tough time with the porch and the outdoor area in general. Yeah, I think you figured out the outdoor porch wall just fine. It is still a little similar in value, so I would maybe lighten it up out here, or lighten it up in here. So, that might not be exactly what you need, but maybe just give a couple little reflections here, because there is so much lovely value. Again, great job with the floor to the wall. But if it's nighttime, maybe we'd be seeing more reflection on the outside, and if it's daytime, maybe it'd be a little bit lighter in here. I'm not sure, but you might want to think about that. And then just a tiny bit more clarity. It looks like things got a teeny bit blurred with all the value put in, but there's still a lot to appreciate here. Each and every photograph, these like pumpkins, and the way this is the detailing here is sort of the showstopper for me. Just that way that TV stand just like rises in that nice little curve and that shadow right there. So good attention to detail. And then this one I talked about in the draft. So you raised that cabinet, which looks good there, and it looks like you gave a little bit of depth to that cabinet detail there. You gave some value to the back wall, so thanks for doing those revisions. But one thing I think that this piece needs is less reliance on outlines. So the curtains, as I mentioned in the earlier draft, you can look at some of the other examples from your classmates, but how you want to draw the folds of cloth and the ridges and curtains as a difference between light and dark rather than lines. So this whole thing, if you imagine, if I plucked out all the outlines, the whole piece would sort of vanish. So try to build every object as you have here with the pots and pans. And I think someone mentioned in the draft that these were really pleasing to look at. And I think that's precisely wise, because you have this lovely highlight and shadow and attention to detail. You can tell the depth of the sink there, but everywhere else you sort of just rely on the outlines. Not just, but there is a heavy reliance on the outlines. So give that some thought. You can incorporate, as long as you're getting so detailed into cabinetry, you can think about the toe kick there under the cabinets, rising those up from the floor a little bit. Have some fun with the reflection on the toaster back here. And, are these burners, are they actually white as you've drawn them with a big heavy outline, or is there a difference there with the way that this range, maybe there's some thickness there. So it's kind of never ending. The more you look, there's more that could be done. So at a certain point, perspective is about like when you feel like the space is really believable, I could come in here and pull this drawer handle out because, I can see that there's a little depth there for my fingers to reach in, or there's a little shadow or a difference in value, then that's going to be really helpful. And then you could also give us kind of a clue as to what's outside there. But all right, this was such a pleasure to watch you work through these. Many of you said, in terms of what was the more helpful demonstration, it was our time together on Zoom. So I just wanted to say that I agree. I find that the easiest way to get the information across to you. So please do take advantage of the office hours and let me know other times that you'd like to meet, because I know you can't all meet at that time. But I'm just really always willing to dive in deep with your work and to give you pointers in real time. So thank you again. Please do reach out with any questions you have.